Hey guys, welcome to Herding Little Cows to the Glory of God. This video is about this little guy right here and something you guys think is super controversial that I'm going to be talking about today. But look how cute he is. He's just so cute. He's like, oh, there's my daddy over there. So anyway, what I'm going to talk about today is blanket training because I mentioned it on my video of me and Virginia together. And we have done blanket training for some of our children. We have not done blanket training for some of our children. And I think blanket training has a very bad rap. I originally heard about blanket training from Michelle Duggar, and people have problems with the Duggars, but I have to say there are things about Michelle Duggar that I find very encouraging, and like just the fact that she doesn't raise her voice all the time. There's a lot of people who think they have to yell at their kids to make them obey, and I don't think you have to yell to make them obey. So anyway, I think there's a lot of good we can learn from different people, even if we don't agree with everything they do. I have looked up articles because I've had lots of people mention to me that I am wrong for listening to Michelle Duggar on anything. When I originally learned about blanket training from Michelle Duggar, I'll explain in just a minute what I heard from her. Looking at these articles, people say that she learned blanket training from Michael and Debbie Pearl. I do not in any way recommend Michael and Debbie Pearl's books to anyone. And I had already read Michael and Debbie Pearl's books before I read Michelle Duggar. So if she had been, what's it called? Like talking about their books, I would have said, I'm not even going to read this section because I had already been turned off to their teachings through some other things. But when I originally read her book, and then again, when I found quotes from her just now before I'm making this video, I'm going to explain blanket training in the way that she taught it in her book. There are things with her training that I agree with. There are things with her training that I do not agree with. But it's not what most people say. So she says that when she starts blanket training, she lays out a blanket for her little one. She puts the little one on the blanket and she sits with them having nothing on the blanket and just looking at her. This isn't toys off to the side. A lot of people have thought that that's what blanket training is you put toys you don't want your kids to have off to the side and you just tempt them to want them. This is how she explains it. She puts her child on a blanket. They are to look at her and she says, we're going to sit and be quiet. Okay, let's sit nicely. And for the first time, she does not give them toys. I give them toys on our first time. But from this point on, her and I agree with the quotes that I have been reading Michelle Duggar say in her book. She sets them on a blanket. She gives them a favored toy. I usually do toys that they can have, and their job is to sit and play quietly on the blanket for a set amount of time. This is not, they never get to explore the rest of the house. This is not, they only sit on the blanket all day. This is for a predetermined amount of time. They sit on the blanket and they play with a toy that they enjoy. And you encourage them. Good job sitting on the blanket. Yay, you're being quiet. If they get off the blanket, you remind them, nope, this is blanket time. We're going to stay on the blanket. Here, play with your toy. There was talk about if a child throws their toy off their blanket, they do not get the toy back. And I do that same thing when I have a child in the high chair. If I'm not sure, if I think they may have dropped the toy, I hand the toy back to them. But if they are taking the toy and throwing it on the floor, they've lost the toy. And in the same way, on this blanket time, you're not going to make mommy play pick up my toy for me if you're throwing it off the blanket. If you have a little one, like our little guy is 9 months old, if he's playing with the toy and it's a bigger toy and he drops it and it rolls off the blanket, I'm not going to punish him by not giving it back. But if he's purposefully throwing it off the blanket, I'm not going to hand him back the toy that he doesn't want. And so some people have equated this to having like a playpen in your purse. You have a blanket and that is their spot they sit on. We have done blanket training with our children, with different children at different times. One of those times we were actually living in a church building. We had an apartment in the church building, but we used parts of the church building throughout the week for different events and activities. And so the children did not always have to sit quiet during church time. And so when it was actually church time, they had a blanket and that's where they were allowed to sit. And it just differentiated in their mind, this is a time to sit quiet. And the rest of the time was we get to explore and we get to be up. We also have used blanket training when we met in our home or a friend's home for church. We've done a couple different times where we have home churched with different families, not just our family staying home, but been meeting with other Christians within our home to have church services or within their home. And that was a time, again, to differentiate. This time is for sitting quiet. Normally you're up and playing in this place. I think people have taken the idea that there is correction in a child trying to get off the blanket, and you can take that word correction however you want, because I don't agree with how everybody corrects their children. But the idea of correction is the same thing as, like, if you take your child to the store and you put them in the cart, you would correct them if they are licking the cart. You would correct them if they're trying to stand up in the cart. You would correct them if they were throwing food out of the cart. That same type of correction in just saying, no, we're going to stay on the blanket for now. I do this in various ways throughout the day, whether it be sitting on a blanket, sitting in your car seat nicely, sitting in the tub nicely. In the tub, you don't get up and walk around and try to jump out or throw your toys out of the tub. Sitting in a high chair. And none of these things are things like, our children only sit in a high chair. I'm not saying this is right or wrong for anyone else, but like for my family, our kids only sit in the high chair when we are sitting at the table with them. Or maybe I set them in the high chair so I can go get the plates and bring them to the table. But it's not like I'm sitting them in the high chair for hours on end. They're sitting in the high chair when there's someone sitting at the table next to them, and then they're out of the high chair. I'm not expecting it to keep them contained all day long. That's the same idea with the blanket time, is I need a few minutes. Maybe it's I need a few minutes to get raw meat into the oven. And so my hands are going to be dirty and stuff. And if you've trained them well that, okay, it's blanket time, we're going to sit out on our blanket. Yay, you enjoy this time. You get to play with the toy you like. It means that I have a few minutes to get something done where I can have dirty hands and not have to be picking up the baby. Of course, if the baby is falls and hurts themselves, I'm going to go right to the baby. But there are times that you need to be able to do this. Most people contain their children during this time by putting them in a high chair, putting them in a car seat, putting them in a bouncer or a swing or something like that. All this is having your child have self-control enough to sit on a blanket. It's not a time to, I know people say that this is a time where people are just beating their child, but that's not what it is. It's a time where children are having fun by playing with a toy that you've given them. I think it is very wrong to tempt your child. There are many things in this world where you need to tell your child, no, we are not going to do that. But I don't think you have to put those temptations in front of them. So, like, we have been going to our one of our elders' houses at church. We've been going to their house for Bible study. They have a wood stove. I don't want the baby to even get like comfortable with the idea that he gets near a wood stove. So that is a no, and it's a corrected, you need to stay away from that. Maybe it's plugs around your house. Maybe it's when you open your oven door, the baby knows that they need to stay back. Those are all things within your realm of your house that your child needs to know, this is a no, we do not touch this thing. So in the same way, you are teaching your child that, no, we're not going to do this. But I don't think that you need to put the temptation in front of them. We take toys, like if we have a big kid toy, we put it in a room where the kids can't have, a baby can't have it. So in our home, we have older kids, and so they want to be able to do things like Legos or a marble track, or they're working on a project right now where they're making like dollhouse pieces. Those are all too small for the baby. So we have a room that the baby is not allowed on the floor in that room, so that these small pieces, if they get dropped, are not going to be put in the baby's mouth. I don't sit him outside the door of that room and say, no, you can't go in there. No, you can't go in there. But if he crawls over to that room and starts to go in, I say, nope, we're not going to do that. And I take him away from the problem. But I don't set him outside the door going, oh, don't you want to go in there? Don't you want to go in there? No, don't go in there. And then how some of the people teach these things are to then smack your child. I don't feel that you need to put that temptation in their way. So that's how we do blanket training within our own home. That's how Michelle Duggar taught blanket training along the way. I don't know how it's taught now. That is the book that I read. I think it was 19 counting on or something like that. 19 kids and counting. I don't remember. It was one of the books that she wrote. That was how I originally heard it. That is how I did it. People who are making comments on my video about how they can't believe that I would follow Michelle Duggar in these things, if you listen to what I just said, she was talking about letting a child play in a contained area, whether for you, that's a car seat, that's a swing, that's on a blanket, that's in a playpen. Play in a contained area with a toy and remind them, we're not going to yell right now. We're going to be quiet right now. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So if you have comments about that, leave those below. But please don't just throw out the baby with the bathwater because you don't like some other teaching that's been taught, or because you've heard, well, I heard this person thinks this, because I have seen documentaries about the Duggars. And I'm not saying that I agree with everything the Duggars did, but I've seen documentaries about the Duggars that have taken things that they said or didn't say way out of context to make big families look bad. And while I don't want people to do that to me, I want to remind you to not do it to them. So thank you for joining us on Herding Little Cows to the Glory of God. Sorry for this controversial issue. I just felt like we had to talk about it, and we'll see you guys next time.